Every country in the world is in debt. The United States debt has surpassed $38 trillion, reaching the highest level in its history. The European Union has around $14 trillion, and Japan has nearly $9 trillion in debt. Even oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia or export giants like Germany and China are running on massive debts. Here's where the most confusing, paradoxical part begins. If everyone is in debt, who is this owed to? Financial historiography shows that at this intersection of money, power, and history, nothing is as it seems. Debt is not just a burden. It is the very fabric of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise and fall rests on this invisible scaffolding. If you follow the chain of creditors long enough, you discover that chilling truth. The world does not owe something to specific outsiders, but actually owes it to itself. However, this does not mean everyone benefits equally from the pie. How did we reach this point, where the planet is buried under more than $315 trillion in debt, roughly 3 times the size of the global economy? Centuries have passed since the first credit card or digital transfer. The idea of national debt was not born on Wall Street, but on battlefields. An idea born on battlefields a year is 1694. England is at war with France, and its gold reserves are running out. The king finds the solution by turning to merchants. In exchange for a promise of future interest payments from taxes, merchants finance the state, and the Bank of England is established to manage this system. This is a revolutionary step. The state can now consume money it does not yet possess. In return, it gives lenders something invaluable, an official promise from the government that can be bought and sold: the government bond. The seed of the modern financial system is thus planted. France copies it, the Netherlands develops it. The newly independent states of the United Kingdom adopt this system to finance their revolutions and westward expansion. National debt becomes a measure of reliability rather than failure. In the past, states conquered territory to gather gold. Now they issue bonds and collect interest. Battlefields transform into balance sheets. So, whose hand is on the rope? Over the past 3 centuries, debt has become the world's dominant export product. America owes $38 trillion, Japan owes $9 trillion, and global debt increases by $1 trillion every 100 days. Everyone borrows, every bank lends. With our taxes, our savings, and our retirement funds, we are all both debtors and creditors. So who is holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with America, because the debt there's not just national, but global. About half of the $38 trillion debt is publicly held, meaning it belongs directly to investors. 2/3 of these investors are American banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the U.S. Federal Reserve itself. The remaining 1/3, approximately $9 trillion, is in foreign hands. Japan is first with $1 trillion, followed by China with $800 billion, followed by the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium, and so on. In other words, the saying, "America's debt belongs to China," is true, but only to the extent of 2% of the total debt. The place America owes money to is America again. The Treasury issues bonds, banks buy them. The Fed steps in and buys them to create new dollars. Citizens pay taxes. That tax goes to the interest on the bonds, and from there it flows into American retirement accounts. Like an endless hall of mirrors, the debt is real, but the creditor is the system's own reflection. This cycle works the same way on a global scale. Japan lends to the U.S. through treasuries. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe funnels it to developing countries through the World Bank, and they pay the money back to developed economies by investing their foreign exchange reserves into Western bonds. It is a planetary game of hot potato. The only difference is that the potato is made of words. Everyone is holding someone else's promissory note. There is only one rule: no one is going to leave the table. Markets and central banks, the fourth and most powerful layer in between, is the markets themselves. Hedge funds, pension funds, central banks. They are the true owners of credit. They decide which country gets to borrow cheaply and which one pays the price to survive. When trust runs out, currencies collapse, governments fall. Democracy decides who will govern. and the markets decide who will survive. The high priest of this system is the central banks. They are not just financing debt, they are producing debt. Every time the Fed or the European Central Bank buys a government bond, it creates new money in return. Every dollar in circulation carries an invisible IOU written on it. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Why is debt never paid off? For decades, this will have spun entirely on trust. The machine works as long as investors believe that governments will pay the interest even if they never pay back the principal. So what happens when trust is shaken? We saw in the 2010 Greek crisis, debts became unpayable, bondholders panicked, interest rates skyrocketed. The IMF and ECB stepped in, but in return, they imposed austerity measures, tax hikes, spending cuts, and mass unemployment. Bankruptcies chased one another in Argentina, and fuel ran out in Sri Lanka. When the system breaks, creditors, the IMF, rating agencies, anonymous funds suddenly jump at your throat. And yet, after the crisis, the same logic starts all over again. New debts close out the old ones. Old debts are restructured. Because in the 21st century, debt was designed not to be paid off, but to be rolled over. Today, no government plans to completely close its debt. When you and I take out a loan, we pay off the principal, but governments view debt like a permanent subscription. They issue new bonds to pay off the old debt. Interest has become the rent of stability, and the global economy breathes with this rent. America will never zero out its $38 trillion debt. It will roll it over forever. Japan has been rolling over its debt for decades. The ratio has exceeded 250% of its gross domestic product, but interest rates are close to zero. Why? Because investors do not want their money back. They want to renew the deal. Government bonds are the market's safest collateral. If Washington came out one day and said, "I'm paying it all off and closing it down," banks would lose their most solid assets, the dollar supply would collapse, deflation would erupt. Paying off the debt destroys what makes the economy work. Wealth transfer and the real secret when politicians talk about balancing the budget, they are selling an illusion. The goal is not to end the debt, but to make it sustainable. When trust is gone, numbers become meaningless. However, trust is not distributed equally to everyone. The saying, "we owe the debt to ourselves," is only half of the story. Interest payments do not flow equally within society. There is an upward flow from the working taxpayer to the large institutions holding the debt. Debt is not just international. It is a class-based wealth transfer. Global inequality rises hand in hand with debt for this exact reason. The system rewards those who have debt and punishes only those who pay it. At the top of the pyramid, there is no single sinner to blame. Neither China, nor Wall Street, nor the IMF. It is all of them and us. The line between debtor and creditor has become so blurred that while debt was once slavery, today it has become the balance of the system. When trust breaks and this balance is disrupted, the only thing we remember is this: a massive promise that could never be kept forever.